Hey guys, Michael here, the Homemade Genius, here with another video for you today. That's right, some back-to-back episodes. We are working on the series from concept to cutting edge, and in the last episode we talked about steel selection, and I told you what I'd be using for this project, 1084. And as promised, we're going to go ahead and start hacking on some of this steel. I've got my templates ready, I got my marker, and most importantly, I got my steel. Alright. One thing to keep in mind that I wanted to mention to you guys before we actually go out to the shop and start hacking on this stuff is placement. You know, these steel bars don't come, you know, in shorter lengths, and it's really easy just to say, okay, I'm making an 8-inch knife, I'm going to hack it off at 8 inches. Don't do that, because this stuff is not cheap, you know, and when you get it, you want to keep it and take care of it and be sure it's going to be there for you every time you're ready to make a knife. So what I like to try to do is kind of plan my cuts ahead. I've got my templates ready, and also I've got my marker. And the marker I'm using are one of these Sharpie silver, it's more paint than it is marker, but it draws out, I'll show you, in that silvery, sparkly color. I don't know if it's coming up well on camera or not, but it does come up really good when you mark the steel. I like it better than the black marker. It's just a preference for me. The black marker can sometimes get hidden in the poor light out there. But you use what's available, what you have. I've seen people use those wax crayons, not the Crayola ones, but the ones like you get at Lowe's and Home Depot. Regular black marker, like I said, would work. You could probably do it with a pencil. And the very first one I ever did, when I used a paper template, I laid it down with a little I laid it down with a little spray glue, hit it with spray paint, peeled it off, and did it that way. But on this one, what I want to do, I'm going to try to do this as best I can, I want to explain the layout process, or how I lay out the knives. If you go in and you just take a knife, let's say you're going to start out with this knife, and you lay it down, you're ready to start cutting, and let's say you want to do another knife, so you're going to lay the next one right next to it. However, you are going to end up cutting steel. You're going to end up cutting the steel, and I'm just going to use this as a marker, right up to that point, roughly. So what happens is you've laid two knives side by side, and you want to cut those knives. And you're essentially going to be using, let me get my tape measure. So you're essentially going to be using, if I go right off the end here, about 19 and a quarter, say 19 and a half with waste, 19 and a half inches of steel to make these two knives. And that makes sense, because each knife this particular knife happens to be about 10 inches long, and this one is just under 9 and a quarter inches long. It's actually 9 and an eighth. So yeah, 19 and a half inches, that adds up. 10 plus 9 and a quarter, roughly. Yeah, right about there, that makes sense. Well, the problem is, if you think ahead with your placement, and you start with the butt end first, and actually with this butt end first because it's more flat than this one, you could pack this all the way to the end, get your knife lined up here, take the other knife, instead of going butt to butt, turn it around and flip it over, and let these two pass by each other. Give yourself enough room to cut, give yourself some space, you know, you're going to need that. But line it up. Now all of a sudden we went from here, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, let me move this over. I'm going to do a little side by side. I'm going to reset this up the way I had it before. So if I took this knife and just laid it down, and I took this knife and just laid it down right about here and gave myself the room I needed, I am cutting my knife, I'm cutting about that much stock, as I said before, roughly 19 and a half inches. Yeah, right at 19 and a half inches. With a little planning and foresight, proper placement, put the right handle put the flatter handle in first and lean it up against to the square corner. Take this one, flip it over, slide it over, go right about there. I've basically taken a 19 and a half inch cut and trimmed it down to 18 and a quarter inches. Now that gives me about 1 1/4 inches more stock to work with tomorrow. Why is that a big deal? Well, it is a big deal. It's a big deal because every inch of this stock is precious, and you need to treat it, you need to have as little waste as humanly possible. Again, like I said, because it is expensive. It's not cheap stuff. So when you're cutting this stuff out, think in advance. You want to squeeze the maximum number of knives out of one bar of stock as you possibly can. You're not going to keep making, maybe you will, but most people are not going to keep making the same knife over and over and over and over and over again. And even if you did make 100 of these or 50 of these, you could still use the same thing and squeeze every inch of steel you can out of your bar of stock. Alright, so let's go ahead and I'm going to mark this out. Give me a couple of minutes here. I'll mark the placement of each one of the knives out, try to maximize my real estate here, and then next scene we'll go ahead and start hacking the stuff in the shop. Won't do a lot of talking out there because the audio is going to be terrible and there will be a lot of noise, but you'll be able to follow along. Essentially, I'm going to mark each piece out, get it as perfect as I possibly can. I always recommend when you're marking tops here, when you're marking your stock here, to try, to line the top up as best you possibly can. If you've got a relatively flat top like I do here on this one, line it up perfect. Line it up as perfect as you can. You don't want to have to cut every square inch of this. You can get away with cutting with not having to cut certain areas if you think ahead and you plan ahead. There we go. Not sure how well that's going to come out on film. For me, for working right here, it's almost like having a highlighter on here. I'm not sure how well that's coming out, but it looks perfect on this end. So I want to take the next knife. I got to consider the thickness of the blade that I'm be using to chop this, because in this section I have a chop saw that I'm going to use to split these two pieces out. So from here, line it up on the spine as perfect as I can get it. And give myself a little bit of play in there. Everything's perfect. My phone is going bananas. Somebody must want something. This one's actually going on 1/4 inch steel, and that's out at the shop, so I'm going to mark that in there using the same techniques I did here. I'm not going to bore you with that. So let's go ahead and take it over to the shop, watch me do some cutting, and we'll be back here in just a few minutes. Stick around, guys. Alright guys, well hopefully you understood a little bit more about the process. I tried to show you as best I could. Again, it's really jam-packed in there, and I've got to do some major cleaning as well as a little bit more remodeling. It's really just a simple matter of using the tools you have available. I'm not sure if I got the clip in there where I had to use the angle grinder. The camera kept fiddling in and out with me. But, you know, things to keep in mind when you're doing it. I don't know if you saw, there was a bucket of water in there that I kept with me, that I kept quenching the metal with. I didn't want to let it get too hot. One of the things to keep in mind when I'm working that chop saw, I'm not bearing down like I'm trying to just ram it through. I mean, you'll burn the metal out and just get hot spots all over it. You know, you put it in there, rest it a little bit, put it in there, just kind of ease it into it. It's kind of like just being, you know, gingerly trying to get it through. Remember, you're not trying to chop through the metal with that chop saw if you're using a blade like that. The blade is trying to get through. All you're doing is guiding it and let it do all the work for you. You won't burn your metal out, you won't burn blades out, and really it's a safer way to work. So, we're sitting here with 3 metal blanks. All ready to continue the process. I've got a little bit of refining to do on some of these blades. It's getting late. There's a few other things I had to get taken care of today, so I had to stop for the day. But I wanted to take these and match them up. Again, this is for this one. So you go in, just wanted to see how well it's coming across. And as expected, very little bit left to take off there. I don't know if you could see that or not. Now, another thing to keep in mind, very close. I just got very little bit left to do. Another thing to keep in mind when you're doing these knives, this metal again is going to feel substantially different than your hardwood your hardboard if in fact you did use it. This feels leaps and bounds different than a piece of paper you're going to cut out. So each step in the process brings you a little bit closer to what that knife is going to feel like. I can hold this knife in my hand and I can feel how well it feels. It's different than this. Even though the profile is almost spot on perfect, it feels different. So this is a great time for you to really refine that shape and make sure it's exactly what you want it to be. I like this knife. I kind of stopped in the grinding in some of these areas because it really just felt right in my hand, and I can visualize with the handle material on here what the end product is going to really ultimately feel like. But that's about it, guys. This is not really a complicated process here for the stock removal. Again, I got to do some final touching on this to make sure it's exactly what it needs to be before I'm ready to move on to the next step. Any questions or comments, as usual, leave them down below. If you are a knife maker or you have experience with making knives and you saw the way I was doing the work out there and you have a suggestion or a tip or a better idea or even a tool that I could probably add to my arsenal that I don't have out there, by all means, tell me all about it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, and so would the community. Alright guys, that about sums it up for today. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks a lot. Genius out.